to Brandstorm, the podcast that talks to the people behind America's brands. I'm Dan Trzynski, president of Platypus Advertising and Design.
And I'm Nancy Christopher, PR director at Platypus. How well do you know your customers? Our guest today is obsessed with the customer experience and says if you're not customer-centric, you're losing an opportunity to create a competitive advantage and grow financially. Please welcome Greg Chapman, who is also known by his clients as the Pocket CMO. How are you, Greg?
I'm good. Hi, Dan. Hi, Nancy. How are you guys?
Great. You know, that's a really clever name. It's very friendly, very approachable. How did you come up with it, and how does the Pocket CMO relate to what you do?
Well, I've been a business veteran, marketing and merchandising for, about 35 plus years. And, I've served a couple of roles in the chief marketing officer role and chief consumer experience officer role. And about 3 years ago, I was presented with an opportunity to create my own consultancy, which I did. And the name Pocket CMO just seemed a natural fit. Anecdotally, I had a meeting. One of my first meetings was with the CMO for a large sporting goods organization out here on the West Coast. And he asked me point blank, how do you engage? How will you work with us? And as I described my effort and how I would work with him, I kind of came up with a comment that said, look, you need to look at me as your Pocket CMO. And it was just interesting. He kind of pounded on the table and he said, that's what you should name your business.
Yeah, I agree with him. That's great.
Tell us a little bit more about who you've worked for in the past.
I've had a great career. I'm very proud of it, and it's just been fun. I kind of describe my career in thirds. I spent the first third of my career in kind of traditional retailing, and I held a variety of roles, operational and merchandising. I was a senior merchant for a while and actually got out into the field and ran stores at the district level and even a region for a large catalog showroom company at the time called Best Products. I spent about 12 years with Best Products, but then I moved into kind of the specialty catalog game, and I went to work for a company called the Sharper Image, where I held a senior merchandising role. But the interesting thing about that is the Sharper Image was a place where you really had to have intimate knowledge of your customer because it was an item business. And if you're going to go out and find the specific items that resonate for the Sharper Image customer, you've really got to know them and what their needs are, what their expectations are. So that was kind of my introduction into the specialty catalog and direct response marketing business. From there, I moved over to a startup company at the time called SkyMall. I was hired
My favorite. I loved reading that while I was on the airplane. It was great stuff. Great stuff.
Yeah, it was very interesting, and I say tongue-in-cheek, I helped get SkyMall off the ground. I was their first merchandising officer. So that was it's just a great experience working for SkyMall. After that, I spent a little bit more time in different aspects of direct response. I worked in the TV industry for a while, the home shopping industry. And then I settled into a 10-year stint with Sears, kind of a small company located there in the Midwest. I had the opportunity to run some very great businesses for Sears. I ran direct mail for a bit. I ran their catalog business for a while, ran website divisions and specialty merchandise, which was the credit card in-statement marketing business. So after that, kind of the last third of my career, I ran a full service digital marketing agency for a bit, and then ultimately made it out here to the West Coast in San Diego, where I was chief customer experience officer for a company called Provide Commerce, which operated 7 different gifting brands.
So I know this may sound like a silly question because I'm totally in your camp here, so is Dan, but why is it so important to know your customer?
In my opinion, it's the only way that you're going to fuel growth. For as fast as things are moving and as fast as we're moving into the digital age, to me, there's a lot of still old school things that really stick. One of them is called an Ansoff matrix. And Igor Ansoff in 1957 created a matrix for strategic guidance and growth for companies. And he basically says this: there's really only 4 strategies. You can take your market and service and try to go deeper to your current audience, right? That's market penetration. You can take your current product or service offering and go to new markets, which is market development. You can take your existing product line and expand on it. You can add new products or services and show it to your existing market. And then there's basically diversification. You can take new products, new line extensions, and show it to new markets. But in every one of those cases, you've got to know what the customer wants, what the customer needs, what the customer expects. And each one of them have different risk and reward ratios. Market penetration is pretty low risk, but it's also fairly low reward. Diversification can be very high risk, but it can also be very high reward. So what I say is mitigate that risk. The insurance is knowing intimately your customer and what their expectations are.
In your opinion, how much time do marketers today spend on understanding their customer and knowing your customer versus just doing the tactical of just coming up with a new slogan and the new headline and, okay, we need a new ad campaign?
My short answer is not enough. I think that's the obvious answer, but look, there's tremendous value, and I don't mean to minimize the value of A/B testing, and I don't mean to minimize the work, the great work, because I've done it before, the great work that agencies do coming up with, as you mentioned, Dan, taglines and reworking that. But what this all has to stem from is, especially in today's experience economy, it's got to stem from knowing your customers' expectations, knowing your customers' needs, knowing your customers' wants, knowing their desires, and knowing that intimately from both quantitative and qualitative research. Data is great. We're in the age of big data, and numbers can tell you a lot. But I like to use the baseball analogy. Sabermetrics in baseball can tell you an awful lot, and teams like the Houston Astros have been wildly successful using data to make decisions. But at the end of the day, players got to play out on the field, and they've got to play with emotion, and they're going to have bad days. They're going to have off days. They're going to go into slumps. I say it somewhat, tongue in cheek, but customers are the same, and you've got to know their emotional needs and wants and their desires. And so when I say know the customer, it's blending that, the quantitative, the data, qualitative, the ethnographic research, developing personas as well as segment profiles.
I always think back to, there was a time when Target and Kmart, you could hardly tell the difference between them. But then Kmart fell by the wayside. Target has certainly had a resurgence, is extremely popular these days. What do you think happened there?
That's a marvelous question, because I think back to Target, and the difference that Target started to make was when they discovered a little niche for themselves called cheap chic, right? Remember that?
Yep.
Yes.
And that was really the catalyst. Now think about that for a minute. How did they arrive at that? They stepped back and said, look, we're in a highly competitive environment. We're in the discount retail environment. We don't necessarily want to brand ourselves as an upscale discounter, because that seems a bit ironic in terms of approach. But so they landed on, look, cheap chic. And there was their point of differentiation right there. And I think it fueled them like a rocket.
Boy, it really did. What's your process for understanding a client's customer and developing those buyer personas?
I don't want to express it as a templatized model or process. There's a myriad of approaches. The best approach, from my point of view, would be to perform some segmentation. And when I say perform segmentation, there's a lot of ways to do that, right? You can take your existing database, we used to call it an RFM analysis. You can look at recency of purchase, frequency of purchase, monetary value of purchase, score your database. You can segment that way. And it's a great model. It's certainly worked for years with direct response, but it gives you kind of a backward look based on existing customers on a database. Very effective, and you can do lookalike models from it. My preference would be to perform a market segmentation, a quantitative-based, survey-based market segmentation. There's lots of great ways to do that, lots of great companies to partner with in terms of building algorithms that also let you do things like household the customers once you get the responses back. But the key thing that I find that most companies miss is segmentation is great. You get a great demographic profile. You actually do get into some ethnographic or psychographic information. But the missing link sometimes in segmentation is economic value of a particular segment. One of the things that I think you really have to do as you're understanding who your optimal customer segments are is understand, what's their wallet like in terms of the product category or the service area that you work in. How much of that share of wallet can you obtain? What's the financial opportunity out there? Start with quantitative segmentation, move to ethnographic, qualitative research so that you can build personas, give a name, a face, a personality to the customer, and then start developing that differentiated value proposition that resonates specifically with that target segment to maximize your value to them.
Once you've identified the customer and you've got that persona built, it's Susie, she drives a Subaru, on and on. Then what
loves
comes?
Dogs.
Loves dogs. What comes next?
Yeah. Well, the thing about a persona and the thing about understanding the customer that intimately is you know how to talk to them and you know how to build an experience around them. But you're at an important juncture now, because the next big step in my mind is actually performing some customer journey mapping. And customer journey mapping is really a critical thing right now. It always has been and it always will be. It's just relatively new over the last couple of years. But customer journey mapping is a way to understand really one important and very critical thing. So a differentiated value proposition is a promise. It's the promise that your brand makes. It says to the customer, this is why you should buy from me. This is why I'm different. This is how I add value to you. Where the rub comes is your brand, is your company delivering the experience that fulfills that brand promise? So you perform customer experience, customer journey mapping. You do that with customers, you do that with non-customers, but within your target segment. And really what that starts to tell you is across the arc, across the life cycle, the customer life cycle, every touch point that they have with your brand, are you creating and fulfilling the right experience based on the value proposition that you're making? And that's how you maximize your opportunity for growth.
Is that customer journey map devoted to the experience that they have with your specific brand, or is it the old marketing funnel where it's, awareness, and then they do their homework, and then they come back to who's the easiest person to purchase from at the end of the day at the bottom of the funnel, and so forth?
Yes. The way that I like to describe a customer journey map and the process is it's almost like chapters in a book, right? So you have this relationship that you're trying to establish with a customer, lifetime value, right? You're
Right.
trying to build overarching lifetime value through the life cycle. You're trying to retain that customer, and you're trying to make that customer a brand advocate, right? You want that customer to tell 10, 20, 30 people about your brand. But there are phases that you go through, not unlike the funnel phases. But when I perform customer journey mapping, one of the first things I like to start out with, the first chapter of my book, generally in the map phase, is called triggers. What triggered their thought process around a desire for the item, the product, the good, the service? What got them even thinking about the need or the want or the desire, and why? And from there, where did they go? What websites did they interact with? How did they interact with search engines? Did they perform this on a mobile device? Journey mapping studies every aspect of every touch point across that continuum. So yes, you can correlate it to the traditional product funnel, but to me, every journey map I've ever done has not been templatized. I create phases in the journey that's specific to that particular company and their product or service offering.
So I'm curious, Greg, and I know you do this because all of us as marketers do this. I know in PR, I'm always looking for someone who does something really, really good. So I'm curious, what brand out there do you think really does a great job of knowing their customer, and who maybe doesn't do so great a job?
Wow, that's a great question. I'm going to give you a little bit of a personal experience, okay?
Okay.
I had a particular type of vehicle. I had a BMW, and I had a BMW for a variety of reasons. But one of the things that I was just blown away by was the service relationship and the relationship I had with the brand after the initial purchase. I can't describe it was actually fun. It was actually fulfilling, the relationship I had with the local dealership, the relationship I had through the website, when my vehicle needed service, the way they treated me, the way a service person was waiting for me when I pulled my vehicle on the lot, the way they followed up. Every aspect to me of that experience was kind of benchmark.
So they delivered the ultimate driving experience.
They delivered, it was a pleasure to drive the vehicle. It was even more of a pleasure. Honestly, I didn't dread when the service notification came, right? So
I always do. I don't care.
So I'm not going to name the brand, okay? For a couple of different reasons. I ended up buying a truck.
Oh, okay.
And so, you know what? Nothing necessarily bad. There's nothing I can say necessarily negatively, but I have to tell you that when that vehicle comes due for service, I wince a little bit. The experience is, whether it's over my mobile device, whether it's over the website, when I pull onto the lot into the service dealership, there's a line I stand in, there's a desk I have to walk up to and talk to a person who doesn't really, they know my vehicle by a vehicle ID number. They shuffle me off to a waiting room. And it's just, on the one hand, it's an experience that I expect, right? On the other hand, comparatively speaking, I look at so many different things they could do and opportunities. So to make that experience better for not a whole lot more cost. I'm not advocating that the dealership needs to turn itself into a luxury car dealership. But what I am saying is there's a couple of easy little steps that I think through understanding the customer's expectation and the experience, they can win.
Exactly. So Dan and I were looking at your website, and we saw that you offer this 10-question assessment for potential clients.
Yep.
They're yes or no questions, but they really make you think. What percentage of your clients who take the assessment actually do much of what you're asking? And what exactly is the danger of not knowing the answers to those questions?
The reason I put the 10 questions together is to be provocative. Have you thought through these things? I have yet to talk to a client, and look, I'll put myself in their shoes too. In most of the roles that I've been in, I couldn't answer yes to all 10 of those questions.
Yeah, they're tough.
Honestly, it's not intended to say yes or no. I don't think there's a brand out there that can answer yes to all 10 of those questions. The thing is that the questions represent a couple of things. They represent prioritization. There's some that if you can't answer yes to them, there's some that are more important than others to start on first. And secondly, they are kind of a model of how I would approach an engagement and the questions that I would ask in the discovery process.
So before we tell everybody what that website is, I do have one more question.
Okay.
I have one more too.
You do? Okay. Can I ask mine first?
Sure.
All right. This process of journey mapping and buyer personas and all that stuff, it sounds like a lot of work. Is this something, and I can understand why large advertisers do this?
You took my question.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I know
Dan.
where you're going.
Do you want to ask the second
No, go
half?
ahead.
Okay. So the second part of that question is, can smaller businesses do this as well?
Absolutely. This is not a model just for big or even medium-sized businesses. In my practice, I work with companies of all sizes. There are many different methods, many different ways to perform research. Sometimes I use secondary research. I use research that's already been done or already been provided, already been performed, and I derive segmentation work or persona work from secondary research.
I've used that too. I always called it Burger King research because Burger King just used to open up across from McDonald's. We let them do all the rooftop counts and traffic counts and everything else. And
the thing is performing the work is one thing, and there are a variety of solutions out there. When you have the data, what to do with it and how to apply it is really where I come in. So
exactly.
Yes, I'll probably partner up with a variety of different firms to perform segmentation. And I've done that at a national level. I've done that at a regional level. I've done that at a local level for local marketers. I have a client who's basically their target audience is just San Diego County. So we've done customer experience mapping. We brought in target customers from all over the county and mapped out the entire journey, every touch point. And one of the outputs of that, we really recreated his whole website after this experience, because what the journey mapping really revealed is the way that the website played a role in the customer's expectations of the relationship development was out of sequence. It was a great site. The content and the actual material, the execution of the site was great. The way the material on the site was presented was out of sequence to the customer. It wasn't building the right story. This was a very small business here in San Diego. The principles are still exactly the same. It doesn't matter if it's $1 million business, a $10 million business, a $10 billion business. The steps that we went through were the same steps, and they revealed the same things. So this is not necessarily a function. This approach is not necessarily a function of big budgets, big markets, big brands. It's really a set of disciplines that every company should go through and a set of questions that every company should ask of themselves.
Okay, so where do they go to see those questions?
My website is www.thepocketcmo.com. We'll have the questions there. We'll also, in the past, what we've tried to do is put some blog content up that starts to break down each question and provide some answers to each question. So that's where you can find them.
And you'll work directly with a company, an owner, a marketing department, their agency. It doesn't matter. You can engage with anybody in that chain, correct?
Absolutely. The thing about the Pocket CMO, one of the things that I have to say, I was a bit surprised when I established the consultancy and sort of broke out on my own, if you will. I was surprised at the number of businesses that either don't have a chief marketing officer. I wasn't surprised at the number of businesses that don't have a chief customer officer or a chief experience officer. That's a role that needs to be added here quickly. But my point is this. There's a lot of CEOs out there There's a lot of businesses out there that they don't have that senior marketing role, or perhaps if they do, the chief marketing role is got a lot on their plate. I'd love to say I have a standard templatized model and I'll come in and do XYZ. Every engagement that I've ever had with a company has been different. We might start with question 8 and work back on the questions. We might start with question 2 and start right at the very top around mission and vision alignment to the value proposition, and then build out the experience. So that's kind of the approach, and different companies have different organizational structures and different frameworks, and I work with all of them.
And you wear a lot of hats, Greg. The Pocket CMO, the experience officer, the customer officer. It's awesome what you do, and you have years and years of experience behind you to back you. So thanks so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, it's a big challenge that the CMOs have today. They have to wear these same hats, right? And with technology and the deployment of technology and data becoming such a big part, the traditional role of CMO as the brand officer and is changing. They have to be the voice of the customer across the enterprise now. So thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. And how can people reach you?
So a website is www.thepocketcmo.com. My email address, gchapman, GCHAPMAN @thepocketcmo.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. There's a lot of Greg Chapmans out there on LinkedIn, but I am /Greg Chap, CHAP, Greg Chap. So any one of those methods will work.
Well, Greg, thanks so much. You and I have some history together for a long time, and I really respect your work, and I appreciate the time that you spent with us today. My big takeaways are you really have to spend the time as an agency, work on a ton of execution on a daily basis for a lot of different clients. This stuff that you do is really, really important. I look forward to partnering with you in your new venture and things that I have spinning around in the back of my head. So look forward to talking to you soon, and I hope other people, if you do need services that Greg can provide, you can reach out to him as well. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, it was great.
Thanks a lot, you guys.
I'd also like to say, if you like what you've heard, please don't forget to share, review, and subscribe to Brandstorm.
This is Dan Trzynski along with Nancy Christopher at Platypus Advertising and Design, an awesome company that creates perceptions that influence choice for a variety of local, regional, national, and even global brands on a daily basis. We hope you join us next week for another episode of Brandstorm.